Hello everyone. I have a cat that is just jumping on here and I just finished putting on my makeup and I have some receipts for you. So I'm going to read you guys some stuff and I will not be paying a ton of attention to the comments, but so obviously I have been covering a lot of different topics for a long time, and what's happening right now with these accounts trying to smear me is nothing new to me. It's pretty standard with what I do. You know, it's easy to go after me than like the major outlets that are covering this. So sure. So let's talk about some actual factual relevant information that came about from a wage claim that was filed against Robert Shin and Alpha Plus Realty in 2011. So Robert and 7M on their Withouta crystalball orclue account, they were acting like that everything that I had was bad information. So I thought I could just read you the actual documents and you can decide how you feel. So this is from the wage claim, which they lost, by the way. It says, at issue in this case is the plaintiff's contention that during the period claimed that she was under the control of defendant's chief executive officer, Robert Shin. There is no dispute that Robert Shin is a pastor. Plaintiff contends that all the people that worked for the defendant were religious followers of Mr. Shin, and they were instructed to work for the defendant and told that the work was being done for God. Plaintiff indicated that they had a community compound living, meaning that they lived with the people that they worked with and were instructed where to live. It's funny because the 7M dancers also live where they work and they live with the people that they work with. And their boss is Robert Shin. It's like imitation. So it goes on to say, plaintiff contends that the lunch meals were provided by the defendant and that they had to eat whatever was provided. They might not provide lunch anymore. That could be different these days. Who knows? But this was how it was back then. According to this document. So it says, defendant and they had to eat whatever was provided. The lunch was prepared at the community house and brought to the defendant's place of business. They are not allowed to leave the defendant's place of business for their meal periods. Plaintiff testified that they were provided with rent and food and they were relocated every 6 months, and the compound had a captain. Every compound had a captain. That's not culty at all, to have compounds and moving every 6 months. Like, what the hell? If that's true, that's like, why would you have a compound? Only, I feel like compound is like a cult word. Didn't the Branch Davidians have a compound? Wasn't there a compound down in Jonestown? Plaintiff testified that the people that attended the church were required to do as Mr. Shin indicated if they were not, or else they were kicked out. Plaintiff testified that she and her husband were not living together during this period, although there is no dispute that the plaintiff had a joint checking account with her former husband during the period claimed. Plaintiff testified that she had no knowledge of how deposits were made into her joint checking account. Plaintiff contends that after she resigned, she discovered that payments were deposited into the joint checking account on a bi-weekly basis and indicated that her signature does not appear on any of the checks made payable to her name because she did not make the deposits. So someone was cashing checks for her and forging the cashed checks. It says a review of this exhibit reflects that the payments were made on a semi-monthly basis and the check's dates are the 15th and last day of each month. And they do not reflect the plaintiff's signature. So the Labor Commission looked at the signatures and determined that, they weren't her signatures. The plaintiff testified that the checks were endorsed by Hannah Montgomery a church leader and Mr. Shin's girlfriend. Her name's Hannah Grace Shin now. That's his wife. So apparently back in 2011, the plaintiff says that Hannah was endorsing checks and depositing them and forging her name. This is interesting. Okay. Plaintiff testified that she and her husband were not allowed to withdraw funds or manage their checking accounts. Plaintiff testified that she was provided with a weekly allowance of $30 in cash. $30 in cash. She got an allowance of 30 bucks. Who can live on $30 a week? Plaintiff testified that if she accessed the account, she would get reprimanded because it would be considered as breaking church rules. Plaintiff testified to and presented a copy of an electronic mail message dated July 28, 2010 to Mr. Shin. Plaintiff's Exhibit 1, a review of this electronic mail message, reflects that the plaintiff is affirming that she used a credit card without permission and understood that she was being punished by not being provided with the $30 weekly allowance. And she wanted to know how long this would be for and was advised to contact Hannah Montgomery. So there was an email where she contacted Robert and said, I know I'm being punished because I used money of my own money. I used my own money without your permission, and now I'm not getting my allowance. Or what is she, 10? No, she was actually a whole adult when this was going on. Now, I want to note that I spoke to someone who was in the church not long ago, and they told me that they still have to get permission to use their money. That was the allegation. So I don't know that this has changed. I mean, they told me that Daniel is the one that has to, that was the allegation, is that they have to go through to Daniel to make decisions for everything. So she has to get permission to use her checking account, and there's an email verifying that the Labor Commission had and said, okay, yeah, that this is our evidence and this verifies what her claim is. Plaintiff indicated that she discovered checks made payable to Robert Shin. Plaintiff testified and presented copies of checks made payable to Robert Shin. A review of the exhibit reflects that the checks had the plaintiff's former husband's name only. Plaintiff contends that a review of the bank statements reflect sporadic transactions were made on their joint checking account and that Hannah Montgomery was the one who managed the checking account. Did they just say that they were writing checks to Robert Shin and Hannah was the one that was managing this account? Is that what that just said? Is that what she just testified to? Interesting. And did it say that it reflected that? Plaintiff contends a review of the bank statements reflects sporadic transactions were made on their account and that Hannah Montgomery was the one who managed their checking accounts. This is funny because I think, let me just show you something. We got married and joined a management company that helped me to become successful in a matter of months. I started getting paid from endorsements that dancers like me never had before, and I've been able to pay off my debts. The management company manages my bookings and helps me with my taxes and finances. They wrote fiancés. They misspelled that. Did you see that? It says finances. They're missing an N there. And then James also said, the company is not a religious non-profit organization, but a secular for-profit company run by people who have faith in God. It is their job to manage and control our bookings and our schedules. It's not a manager's job to control your life or your finances, your bookings, or your schedules. In fact, a manager is not a booking agent. An agent is actually the one that does the bookings. Managers are there to guide you and help make you make decisions, but they certainly should not be in your finances. They might give you advice, but they're not there to on a day-to-day basis pay all of your FYI, talents pay agencies and management companies to control their bookings and finances. They pay their agencies to control their bookings and finances. This is not a cult activity. This is also not how B-Dash talks. And secular is a big word at the church, I guess. But yeah, managers are not financial planners. I have a legal team that manages my business, and they for sure are not in my finances. They also are not managing bookings. They're not doing any of that. They sometimes give me advice on certain situations, but I don't have to take the advice because that's the beauty of it. They work for me, not the other way around. It's like, anyways. Plaintiff testified that on April 7th, 2011, she left because she felt that her life was being threatened. Interesting. That's really sad. Now, Mr. Shin testified, and if, I just want to note here, they're not calling him Dr. Shin. He's Mr. Shin because he's not a licensed doctor. You can still call yourself a doctor if you have like a PhD and you have a doctorate, but medical doctors, it's a little bit different because if you are claiming to be a doctor and you're not licensed to be a doctor, you can't claim to be a doctor. It's like actually illegal. You can't be posing as a doctor and using that as like a way to show that you have expertise, especially if you're not licensed to be a doctor, because the world of medicine is highly regulated. So he could say that he has a degree, but he is not licensed. Okay. Mr. Shin testified and affirmed that the plaintiff worked for the defendant during the period claimed and that she worked part-time. Mr. Shin testified that the defendant did not provide plaintiff with any method of timekeeping because the workers are family and friends. So he didn't keep time. There was no time. Yeah, this person said it's kind of like impersonating a police officer. Exactly. You can't impersonate a doctor. So he didn't keep time cards, which is illegal. All employers have to keep time cards. The place of business is a small, casual, informal real estate office, and this was during the real estate crash period. He contends, Mr. Shin contends, that there was no need for extra help, but because the plaintiff's sister was the broker and the plaintiff was unemployed, he decided to place the plaintiff on payroll. Mr. Shin indicated that the plaintiff's rate of pay was $500 gross paid on a semi-monthly basis, starting May 15th, 2010. He testified that he presented a notebook which contained 15 tabs. And then they have that in the exhibits. But they said that this exhibit reflects incomplete itemized deduction statements. It does not include the number of hours worked per pay period and does not reflect the rate of pay. Mr. Shin testified that he was not at the defendant's place of business on a daily basis, although it is his belief that the plaintiff worked 5 to 6 hours a day as plaintiff pursued other interests. Mr. Shin contends that plaintiff was not hired as an hourly employee and was hired as a salary employee. What salary employee, what person takes a salary of, what is that, $500 a month? She's making $6,000 or $12,000 a year. No, $18,000 a year. So $1,000 times, she's making 12 grand a year. Are you serious? Is that what they're telling her that she made? Who gets a salaried position at 12 grand? I've never heard of that. That's like less than minimum wage. Yeah, $1,000 a month. No one gets a salary at 12 grand a year. Okay. Then he says that Mr. Shin contends that the plaintiff's paychecks were handed to her former husband. He testified that essentially the plaintiff was paid. He testified that he has had many businesses and production companies, and the plaintiff and her former husband did not make enough to cover their expenses. Doesn't this sound like, you know how they bring people over from parts of Asia to sex work, and then they tell the workers, you haven't paid off the amount that you owe us, and so we're just going to keep everything? Sounds kind of similar in that he's paying her, but then saying, well, you're not really covering all of your expenses, so I'm not going to pay you. And paying your husband is essentially paying you? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, Mr. Shin testified that during the period claim, plaintiff was provided with a nice home and had access to a car. Plaintiff did not have a car because her car had broken down. Mr. Shin testified and affirmed that he received funds from the plaintiff's former husband as an honor the man of God gift. So he was an honor the man of God gift. So he admits that he took gifts from his employees to honor the man of God. Didn't he just say in a statement from 7M that they were separate organizations? But then his employees from this side are also giving gifts to him as a man of God. And he says, Mr. Shin testified that all members had knowledge of how members were helping each other out. So one thing that she found out was that they were using some of her money to make payments on other people's accounts. So she was paying off other people's debt with her money. Mr. Shin testified that during the period claimed plaintiff was, now the husband, I'm not going to use his name, testified that he did not work for the defendant during the period of the plaintiff's employment. The husband testified that he authorized the defendant to have access to the joint checking account and authorized the expenses paid by the defendant for another church member. So her husband gave access to their joint banking account and allowed them to use the money to pay off debts of other members. You allowed him to have access. Why would you give your employer access to your checking account? And why would you be paying off other people's debts? That's just weird. The husband testified that he and the plaintiff had an ATM card for their joint checking account and that he at one time took care of the things, although he also maintained a separate account for himself. So she had a bank account that had her name on it that she had no access to, it sounds like, because he paid for everything and then the defendants were paying for everything and using her account as their own. That's really weird for your employer to have access to your bank accounts. And this is what was alleged by Lydia. The husband testified that he participated in sharing community needs, meaning that he contributed funds to meet the needs of his friends. The husband contends that he also received assistance in the form of, example, the use of a car and a meal. So her claim, they said, was $14,656 plus 48 hours of overtime at $12 an hour in the sum of $576 for a total of $15,232, less the amount received, which was $75.68. They had a balance due to her of $76.64. And they were able to determine this by going into her bank records. The plaintiff testified that the church paid her rent. Defendant's Exhibit A, tab 10, contains a copy of the rental lease agreements signed by the plaintiff and her former husband. A review of these documents reflect that the plaintiff and her husband signed the lease agreement, and the monthly lease was $2,400. Defendant's Exhibit A, tab 14, contains copies of checks written by the plaintiff's former husband in the amount of $2,400 per month, made payable to the property management company. A review of these checks reflect that the plaintiff's former husband made only, and it appears that the checks were from a different account. So she had no access to an account that was in her name, and they were taking money out of it and like using her check account like their own checking account. Yeah, $2,400, yet they only make $1,000 a month. All right, but I think her husband was an agent too. I don't know. And it says, the plaintiff testified that the church paid for her cellular phone bill. However, the defendant's Exhibit A tab contains a copy of the bill from the period from August 10th through September and the due date of September 27th. A review of the statement reflects that the plaintiff's name and that of her former husband's, and the amount of the statements was $141.52, and the amount was paid via the joint checking account on September 27th. She testified that many of the items listed on the bank statements reflect that the defendant managed the bank account and decided how funds were used. For example, credit card payments were paid for other church members. So they were going into her bank accounts. The employer, by the way, by the way, was going into her bank accounts and paying for other people's credit cards. What the hell? There is no dispute that the plaintiff signed her W-2 forms. Plaintiff testified that she just signed forms and was not allowed to ask questions. The instant claim reflects that the plaintiff is claiming 1 hour per day due to the defendant's failure to provide meals pursuant to Labor Code Section 226.7 from May 11th to 2010 through April 17th, 2011, being 75 days at $8 per hour for a sum of $600, and she testified that she was not permitted to leave the defendant's place of business as food was provided. Plaintiff testified that she was not given a choice regarding the type of food that was provided. The instant check reflects that the plaintiff is claiming liquidated damages pursuant to the Labor Code section 1194-2 in the amount of $84.7888, which is equal to the amount of the unpaid minimum wages. There is no dispute that the plaintiff resigned on April 7th, 2011. Okay. Plaintiff, as the party asserting the affirmative, has the burden of proof, including the initial burden going forward and the burden of persuasion by a preponderance of evidence. By a preponderance of evidence, she has the proof, they said. Sufficient evidence has been presented to support a decision in favor of the plaintiff. So after the whole thing was said and done, they said that she had so much evidence, a preponderance of evidence, that they ruled in the favor of her. They said that her credibility testified that she worked from May 11th to April 17th, that all earned wages have not been paid. She credibly testified that an average that she worked was 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week, and acknowledged that she was provided with paid holidays. She credibly testified that she withdrew a total of $75.68 in April of 2011 from her account, and she testified that she worked overtime during the period claimed. There is no dispute that the rate of pay was $500 per pay period and on a semi-monthly basis. That during the period claimed, she was paid a total of 22 pay periods of $500 times 11,000, equaling 11,000, and this amount includes the $75.68 and the amount that the plaintiff withdrew in April of 2011. The testimony by the parties is clear that they were involved in relationships beyond an employee and employer relationship, as the plaintiff was a member of Shin's church. The plaintiff contends that the defendant controlled her living arrangements, managed her joint checking account, and controlled the food that she ate. So that is, and there's more, I'm just gonna finish right there, but that's like a ruling from the Labor Commission in the state of California. That's not made up, that's not fabricated. That is me just reading, she won. So if we are to compare what's going on today versus what happened then, she says that she was living in a community houses, and that they were using her they were paying all of her bills. B-Dash says that they're managing all of his finances and they're paying his taxes for him and they're controlling his schedule and his bookings and his time. 7M today tried to say that they don't do any of that they have all the free time that they want and they don't work for them. They also said that they're independent talent that control their own resumes and their own careers, which completely contradicts what you would have a manager for. If you are an independent talent, which they are, theoretically, why would you then need a management group to manage your life and then say that you're not managing their lives, but then B-Dash says that they are only a month ago? And why would you have a management company that does nothing then for you? So if you are a manager, you're saying that you only get paid on the bookings. So you're admitting that you're doing bookings for them, but you're not a licensed talent agent, is what I'm hearing. Now, technically, you could do that in the state of California, although it's really not recommended. And managers can theoretically get in trouble legally if they book for their clients. Talents are supposed to have a licensed talent agent to manage their bookings, and a manager is there to manage like the daily aspects of their lives. But a manager is not there to manage bookings generally. And a manager does not generally take a huge percentage. Now they said it's their right as a manager to take 10 to 20%. And a manager could take that much if that's what they wanted. But then they're also claiming today that they don't have any control of what they're doing. So then what are you actually getting paid for? That's my question. The dancers pay more in the IRS than you make in a year. I still want to know how you know this. Do you have hackers that are in my phone? And are you currently looking at my taxes? Because my income is actually not public, and you have no idea what I pay to the IRS or what I make in a year. But then they also said the average amount of time they work for 7M is 0 to 5 hours a week, depending on the jobs lined up. But then they also said that they don't work for 7M, and 2 seconds ago. So let me show you the whole statement. They said they worked 0 hours yesterday and 0 hours today, except for Kylie, who teaches private dance classes because she loves working with kids, which is outside of 7M. The average amount of time that they worked for 7M is 0 to 5 hours a week, depending on the jobs lined up. The rest of the time, they are free to nap, socialize, create content, work out, and live their best lives. It's not monitored or dictated by anyone, and those hours certainly are not paid by 7M. They are individual talents that it's up to them to build their skills and resume on their own. And they are not employees, and we don't monitor their breaks, their lunches, or trips to the restroom, for crying out loud. Okay, you said that they worked for you 0 to 5 hours, but then you also said they're not your employees. So what is the truth? Are they working for you 0 to 5 hours a week, or are they not your employees? And are you their manager, or are they independent individual talents that control their own lives and dictate their skills and resumes on their own? So a manager is generally the one that will have like the relationships with like the press. They're usually the ones that will have relationships with the brands to help with brand deals. They can get you they can get you those relationships, but then the agent is the one that books those. So they also will get you set up in groups that might help you with acting classes, or they might recommend that you do acting classes. Managers are not employers. Yes, in the real world, that's true, Lynn. And it says that they don't, so let's see. If a job comes in, then the performers are paid, okay? But I want to ask them a question. Are you making money on their social media? Are you getting paid on their Reels plays? And are you making money on their TikTok plays? Are you taking 10 to 20% off the plays that they get off of social media? You're telling me you only make money if they get a booking? I highly doubt that, being that Isaiah is the one that's filming all this content that you're putting out. Why would Isaiah be filming the content they're putting on their social media? And why would Daniel be producing the content that's put out on social media if you weren't getting paid for it? Are they just working for free? Are Isaiah and Daniel not getting paid? Make this make sense. I mean, if you can answer that question, I would like to know, why is Isaiah filming all of their videos for them? Why is Daniel producing all of their videos for them? Why is the editing being done and the placement clearly being done by Isaiah? Why are all the videos put out at the exact same time? Why are the accounts clearly being managed by the management and not the individuals? So you're only making money on bookings, but then you're also making money on their social media. So you're not, again, makes sense. It says they get to take a commission, are allowed to take a commission between 10 to 20% on average for their services. I'm confused again what your services are, because earlier you said you don't dictate their time, you aren't booking for them, you said that you're not helping them build their resumes, and you are also not, if they make content, you're not helping with that, even though you are helping them with that because Isaiah and Daniel are part of 7M. So I'm just confused again on how this is actually working. And these are the questions. There's no logical answer, at least that I can find. They're making more money than I make in a year. That's probably not true, if I'm going to be honest. They have no idea what I make. And I've been at this longer than several of these dancers are, so I'm sure that that's not true. But again, it's irrelevant. What does what I make have to do with them? And everything is above ground and legal. They set up the Wilking Sisters 2 page. They're running the Without a Crystal Ball or Clue page. They're running the Miranda Supporters page. They're running a lot of accounts And I'll show you something. In the span of like 20 minutes, this account, hold on, where did it go? And this account, these are all their accounts. And then there was a Russian account, this account. So you have time to create all of this stuff. You know, Lynn, I don't really think that speculating on what they could be making is really going to be beneficial right now, about what a Tommy Hilfiger page video would have made for them. Let's not speculate on the amount of money that they're making. It doesn't help, because I don't want to plant ideas in somebody's head that he got X amount of dollars on that thing, because I've talked to people who flat out told me that they're not making that kind of money, even remotely close. I think someone told me that for one of the commercials that they did, they made $17,000. So this idea that they made $500,000 for a commercial, no way, not even close. They would never pay that kind of money for that kind of, no. So do we also want to ask questions about the fake comments, what appear to be bot accounts, and what appears to be bot accounts, what appears to be fake accounts that are following them, what appears to be that they might have bot followers, because some of them, for their reels, the views don't match the size following. I don't even have 100,000 followers, and I can get over 100,000 on reels, on some of my reels. But you're telling me that Kylie, who has over 100,000, can't consistently hit over 100,000 on her reels, or that I was looking at Concrete's and he had 25,000 on one of his reels, but he has over 400,000 followers. That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And all of the likes and comments are the same. It's a fire, or it's a let's go, or and then all of their comments. Yeah, and then you've got Miranda's videos where sometimes she gets good views and then other times she doesn't get any. And we looked at her social media. Listen, I know that Miranda and Melanie had quite a bit of success over on TikTok. And I know that you can spike in followers very quickly. That can happen in social media. But we audited her followers and we looked at the demographics, and with the system that we were using, I know they said take a commission. I know. Sorry, that was one of my sources, who's fake, by the way, sending me a message, who said they said that they can take a commission. Take, not earn, take. They use really weird language like control and take, it's theirs. Okay. So next, what was I saying? Oh, so we noticed when we looked at the demographics of her account, we thought it was really weird because 42% of her followers were men. I don't know if you know anything about the dance world, and I don't know if you know anything about 42% followers, but the only kind of ladies that have 42% of men following them are not Miranda. And I'm just trying to be very PC. She is not sex pot, right? She's not selling her body. She's not a Instagram model that's doing lingerie and bathing suits. She is not a playmate or a centerfold. 42% of her followers are men, and they're from another country. So you can actually buy followers. I don't know if that's what's happening. But then we also looked at some dancers that are very sexy and very seductive, and they're very beautiful, and not Miranda is gorgeous, by the way. But we looked at some of the dancers that were, I would say, more in line with the types of IG followers that are, or that had the physique of, say, a woman that's doing more of the Instagram modeling, right? And even that model, even that dancer, only had 18% of men following. So even the prettiest and And they had a huge following, bigger than Miranda's, and only 18% were men. The kind of people that are watching dance videos are not men. It's a highly female-dominated demographic. Mostly women are watching dance videos, not men. Which is why, if you noticed, the men's accounts do very well. Why? Women love to watch men dance, right? The dance industry and the dance audience is primarily female. I don't know why you keep saying the number of viewers. Oh, share this live? Yeah, if you want to share this live. Now, your numbers don't have to skyrocket to have bot followers. Like, there's legitimate spikes and they did go viral. And so I would expect that some of that was organic. What I don't think is organic is that 42% of her audience is male from other countries. So your engagement should be a percentage of what's going on your Instagram, right? So there are some of my content that I don't get the best engagement. And this content, for truth, like, some of the posts do really well and others don't, but I'm not caring about. The one thing I find very ironic in all of this is their accounts all exist to gain followers and to gain clout, because they're influencers and they're dancers, and that is the world that they live in. So they want followers, they want the money that comes with the followers, because you get better deals, you get advertising, you get revenue. But then my account hasn't grown at all, maybe a couple thousand. I don't make money actually putting a post on my Instagram. Like, writing out something and posting it as a post makes me $0. And I've made 3 YouTube videos. I have spent probably more on records than I've made on this story, because to me, this is more than just money. If I cared about money, I certainly wouldn't be covering this story. But they care about money, they care about followers, and so anyone that speaks and reports is somehow wanting what they want. Okay, so in regards to what more is there to come out, I'm sure more will follow. I have a bucket of information that I can share at any given time, and a lot of people want more people to come forward and say things. And I posted the message from Angela, which is B-Dash's ex-wife, and I've shared stuff that came from, sources around Daniel. I can't force anyone to go on the record until they're ready, and I won't, and I refuse to manipulate anyone. Like, these are real people, these are real families, and these are real families that are ripped apart. And they have for a long time felt very like nobody cared. Some of them have been living without their loved one for 21 years. Others, it's been 10 years since they've seen their loved one. Some have, they were cut off more recently, but they all have the same story. And all they want is their loved one back, and their loved one to realize that they can have an amazing life outside of all of this. So they've claimed the court cases are old and irrelevant. Well, the wage claim one, I would say, is not irrelevant, because it was actually found in the favor of the plaintiff, and they proved beyond a preponderance of, through a preponderance of evidence, the claims that they made. I would say people will start coming forward. I just say that, like, you can't, I don't know why, like, my reporting and what I'm sharing isn't equivalent in many ways to them coming forward. They've come forward to me and I'm sharing what they're telling you. Eventually they might get to a space where they feel comfortable sharing, but they also have to remember that they fear retaliation and they don't know what could happen if they spoke out. So you can't force someone to put themselves in a situation where they feel like their lives are at risk, or their livelihoods are at risk, or their safety is a risk. I can only do what I do. I'm not going to speculate. All I've said is they're afraid of retaliation. So I'd say the wage claim does not help him. How do you think I got a hold of some of the information I got a hold of? Do you think I just picked this up out of the sky and knew exactly where to look to find it? No. I have sources that are helping me. That's how it works. So when I tell you sources, which every outlet uses, People Magazine uses sources all the time, New York Times uses sources, I'm giving you information that sources provide. So where do I get the information from if not from sources? They can use that as an excuse all day long. Who cares? Can they refute? Can they refute what I just read to you? They'll say it's 10 years old, right? Well, how is it different than what's going on today? Anonymous sources exist in these situations all the time. Did you watch the NXIVM, any of the NXIVM coverage? Do you know how many victims in that case never came forward or were hidden on camera, or their identities were never known to the wider public of the victims? It's every victim's right to remain anonymous, and it's not our place to say that they have to come forward. Specifically, in a case like this, I just want to put this out here, is that if something were to happen and there was criminal charges, and I'm not saying that there are, okay, but if there was criminal charges that ever came up in this case, and it happened to be someone that came forward, then their protection as a victim isn't guaranteed anymore. So if someone is a victim and wants to file a police report, it would be better for them not to come forward. Does that make sense? Because the social media world, you know, the police, when they're conducting their investigations, and the FBI, when they're conducting their investigations, they don't care what the public thinks. They care about the facts. You've had people like the NXIVM people come forward. See, everyone, I don't want to get frustrated here. Everyone keeps talking about how one person from NXIVM came forward. Okay, Sarah Edmonds went to the New York Times and shared what happened to her. Okay, she did a lot to risk that, right? She was also a leader of NXIVM. And if we're going to be honest, she was a victim of NXIVM, but she was also a perpetrator because she also brought people in and was part of the system and was a leader of NXIVM. Sarah's story helped free and take down the cult, but it also probably helped her avoid charges because she blew the whistle. Every other person around Sarah that was involved in this was charged, but Sarah. Think about that. She was close with Raniere, so she didn't get charged, nor did Mark, and those were the people that came forward. They risked a lot to do that too, and they had to hope that the feds wouldn't charge them by doing that. This isn't NXIVM. This isn't the same situation. And coming forward doesn't mean they have to come forward publicly. There's a lot that's at stake here for people, and people get really irritated and they want people to just jump up and down. When I'm literally talking to the victims or alleged victims in this case, I can't tell them that they need to come forward when they're a mom and they've moved on with their life and they don't want to hurt their child, or they don't want to have to go through the trauma again, or they're worried about how it might affect their business, or they're afraid that, you know, their child could get hurt through the process, that their businesses could get hurt through the process, that they could lose their livelihoods as a result of this. Like, it's been 1 month. Frank Parlato, who did the blog for Keith Raniere and was going after NXIVM, he did that for years before anything happened. They were tracking what Keith was doing for years before that NXIVM article came out in the New York Times. Years. Frank Parlato was also a part of NXIVM, which is, again, like a completely different world and a much bigger group. You're dealing with NXIVM that had thousands of people involved in it, and you're comparing it to a group that has, you know, at the peak of the church had 70 members. So any person that comes forward is very high risk because they're easily identified by the leaders. They know everyone. It's not like NXIVM where there's 8,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, or Scientology where there's few million. You're talking about 100 people, maybe. It's just not the same. So we have lots that we're doing behind the scenes, but we're not pressuring victims right now. And that's not going to be my job. I know you guys want answers right now, but I'm not going to push anyone to do anything they don't want to do. So if there would be any investigations into any of this, I would not report that. The last thing you would ever want to do is to tip off someone that they're under the investigation of the FBI. And I don't know of anything, but if there was, I would never report that. And you said, is the FBI secretly investigating this? If they're secretly investigating this, wouldn't I be giving away their secret if I said that they were? You never want to tip off someone that they might be under an investigation, because they will delete evidence, they can get rid of people, they can move people out of the country. It's like the FBI and the feds, they work so low key, you don't even know that they're there. I worked with the FBI for something that happened to me with a stalker from the UK, and the people that were involved had no clue what was going on. And I never said anything publicly, ever. Yeah, and Tony Ortega has been reporting on Scientology for over a decade. I have been reporting on the IBLP for like 4 years. And thus far, Jim Bob Duggar and any of his friends, none of them have been arrested, only Josh. The IBLP still exists. The Duggar kids are still trapped in the cult. So that doesn't stop me from reporting on it, though. Plot twist, B dash is in the FBI. No, I don't want to say, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. My hope is that this will end and that the dancers will leave, that they'll be able to live an independent life and have success outside of this. They could all be so successful. If you're gonna, you guys are so silly. We Need a Mole. Why would you put We Need a Mole on a public live that they'll take a screenshot of? Then they're gonna, you guys are outing their secret FBI investigation, and you're also outing that you're gonna plant a mole in their organization. Y'all are so silly. You don't do that. Could anyone infiltrate? See, why would you say that public? You wouldn't want to announce that. You would never want to announce that. Yes. Desi says, you were attacked for hating Christians for reporting on the IVLP, and then when Josh was arrested, people finally researched that it was public all along about the cult. Exactly. Okay, so let me give you sort of an example of the Josh Duggar situation. I've been covering fundamentalist Baptists, IFB, for years. Most of you that have followed me, especially my IVLP survivors, specifically the survivors of Bill Gothard. I have so many of the survivors of Gothard that I have spoken to and have, helped with just putting out stuff that they've written or sharing. They've helped me better understand how to report on the situation. When I started reporting on it, it was like no one thought that they were a cult, even though it was so evident, right? And there was all this evidence that, Derek Dillard was screaming in 2017 about what was happening, and no one believed him. He made a horrible comment about Jazz Jennings, and he was homophobic and transphobic, right? And